I was 9 months pregnant when I sat in a crowded courtroom preparing to sign divorce papers that would officially end my marriage. My husband sat across from me, cold and confident, acting like he had already won. His lawyer smiled. His mother avoided looking at me. The judge was preparing to finalize everything. Then the courtroom doors burst open. My father-in-law walked in, marched straight toward his son, and slapped him so hard the entire room froze. Then he turned to the judge and said 7 words that changed everything. "He's lying, but he's not the real problem." And before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. I'm also curious, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Let me know in the comments below. Now let's get back to the story. My name is Hannah Parker and I was 31 years old, 9 months pregnant, and sitting in a family courtroom when I thought my entire life was about to fall apart. 3 years earlier, I would have laughed if someone had told me my marriage would end this way. Back then, Ethan and I were the couple everyone admired. We met at a charity fundraiser, dated for 2 years and married 6 months later. He was kind, attentive, and ambitious. At least that's who I believed he was. When I found out I was pregnant, he seemed genuinely happy. He cried when he saw the ultrasound. He painted the nursery himself. He spent hours talking about all the things he wanted to teach our child. For a while, everything felt perfect. Then, around my 6th month of pregnancy, something changed. First, it was subtle. Longer hours at work. Shorter conversations. Less eye contact. Less laughter. Less everything. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he insisted he was just stressed. I wanted to believe him. So I did. But the distance kept growing. By my 8th month of pregnancy, it felt like I was living with a stranger. Then came the conversation that shattered everything. I still remember the exact words. "I think we should get divorced." No warning. No discussion. No attempt to fix anything. Just a decision he had apparently already made. I stared at him in complete disbelief. "What? I can't do this anymore." "Do what?" He looked away. "This marriage." The room spun around me. I was carrying his child. Our child. And somehow he had decided to walk away before our baby had even been born. Over the following weeks, things became worse. Ethan began describing me as controlling. Emotionally exhausting. Impossible to please. The accusations felt completely disconnected from reality. But what hurt most was that his mother immediately supported him. Margaret Parker had always been polite to my face. Now she suddenly seemed convinced I was responsible for everything. According to her, Ethan was simply trying to protect his own happiness. The more they talked, the more isolated I felt. Friends didn't know what to believe. Relatives avoided taking sides. I spent most nights sitting alone in the nursery, wondering how everything had collapsed so quickly. Eventually I stopped fighting. Not because I agreed. Because I was exhausted. I wanted peace. For myself. For my baby. For whatever future came next. The divorce hearing was scheduled just 3 weeks before my due date. I arrived early that morning. The courthouse felt cold and unfamiliar. Every step seemed heavier than the last. When I entered the courtroom, Ethan was already there. His attorney sat beside him. Margaret sat a few rows behind them. Ethan barely looked at me. What struck me most was how confident he seemed. Almost relaxed. Like someone who already knew the outcome. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then the proceedings began. Documents were reviewed. Questions were asked. Formalities moved forward. The entire process felt unreal. Finally, the paperwork was placed in front of me. The final signature. The final step. My hands trembled as I picked up the pen. I looked down at the documents. Then toward Ethan. He met my eyes for only a second. There was no sadness there. No regret. Just certainty. I lowered the pen toward the paper. And that's when the courtroom doors suddenly flew open. Every head turned. A tall gray-haired man strode inside. My father-in-law, William Parker. His face was filled with a kind of anger I had never seen before. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward Ethan. Then, in front of the judge, the attorneys, and everyone watching, he confronted his son. The entire courtroom froze. William turned toward the judge. Then he pointed directly at Ethan. And said words that instantly changed everything. "He's lying," he said. Then his expression hardened. "But he's not the real problem." For several seconds nobody moved. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even the judge appeared caught off guard. William Parker stood beside his son, breathing heavily, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles in his neck were visible. Ethan looked completely shocked. "Dad, what are you doing?" he asked. William didn't even look at him. Instead, he faced the judge. "Your Honor, I apologize for interrupting these proceedings, but I have information that directly affects this case." The judge studied him carefully. "And what information would that be?" William held up a thick manila folder. "The kind that should have been revealed before this hearing ever began." The room grew quiet again. My heart was pounding. I had known William for 5 years. He was calm, thoughtful, and usually avoided conflict at all costs. Whatever had brought him here today had to be serious. The judge eventually nodded. "Proceed." William took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, I discovered something that made me question everything my son had told me." Ethan immediately stood. "This isn't necessary." "Sit down," the judge said firmly. Ethan slowly lowered himself back into his chair. For the first time all morning he looked nervous. William opened the folder. 4 months, Ethan has claimed that Hannah was controlling, emotionally difficult, and responsible for the collapse of this marriage. He looked toward me. I believed him. His voice softened briefly. "And for that, Hannah, I owe you an apology." I didn't know what to say. William turned another page. "Then I found messages." The courtroom became still. "What messages?" the judge asked. William looked directly at his son. "The messages Ethan deleted." A visible wave of panic crossed Ethan's face. My stomach tightened. "Deleted messages? What messages?" William continued. "After Ethan upgraded his phone, old backups were transferred to a family cloud account." Ethan's face went pale. "I wasn't searching for anything," William said. "I accidentally came across them." The judge motioned for him to continue. William pulled out printed copies. "What I found wasn't evidence of a husband escaping a difficult marriage." He paused. "It was evidence of someone being influenced for nearly a year." The room erupted with whispers. My eyes immediately shifted toward Margaret. My mother-in-law. For the first time she looked genuinely frightened. William noticed it too. Then he looked at the judge. The divorce wasn't entirely Ethan's idea. The silence that followed felt deafening. "What are you implying?" the judge asked. William slowly turned toward Margaret. "I'm saying somebody spent months convincing my son that his marriage was a mistake." Margaret's face lost all color. "William." "No." His voice was firm. "Not this time." I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. Suddenly dozens of strange moments from the past year began replaying in my mind. Cancelled dinners. Unexpected arguments. Misunderstandings that never made sense. Conversations that felt oddly manipulated. Things Ethan claimed I had said. Things I never actually said. William lifted another stack of papers. "The messages show a pattern." The judge accepted the documents. As he reviewed them, Ethan stared at the floor. His confidence was completely gone. Margaret sat frozen. Then William revealed something even worse. Several messages discussed what would happen after the divorce. Who would control certain family assets. Who would benefit financially. Who would gain influence over future decisions involving the baby. A shocked murmur spread across the courtroom. Suddenly this wasn't just about a failed marriage. Someone had been planning far beyond that. Then William pulled out one final document. His hands shook slightly. When he looked at it, his expression darkened. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "I believe this is the document that explains everything." And as the judge reached for it, I realized the biggest betrayal of all hadn't even been revealed yet. The judge took the document from William's trembling hands and began reading. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then the judge's expression changed. Fully. Noticeably. He looked up from the document and directly at Margaret. "Is this authentic?" he asked. Margaret didn't answer immediately. Her hands were shaking. Finally she whispered, "Yes." A wave of disbelief swept through the room. My heart pounded against my ribs. "What is it?" I asked. The judge looked at me carefully. "It's a written proposal drafted nearly 8 months ago." My stomach dropped. A proposal. 8 months ago. That was before Ethan had even mentioned divorce. The judge continued. The document outlines plans for post-divorce financial arrangements, living arrangements, and future family decision-making. The room erupted with whispers. William closed his eyes, like a man finally confronting a truth he never wanted to believe. Margaret looked down at the floor. The document made one thing painfully clear. The divorce had not been a sudden decision. It had been discussed and encouraged long before I ever knew there was a problem. For months, conversations had happened behind my back. Suggestions, pressure, manipulation, a slow erosion of trust. The judge eventually set the papers down. I am postponing today's proceedings. Relief flooded through me so suddenly I almost cried. The divorce wasn't finalized. Not today. Not based on half-truths and hidden information. Then something happened I never expected. Ethan stood. For several seconds he couldn't meet my eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I let it happen. The courtroom fell silent again. I should have defended my marriage. His eyes filled with regret. I kept listening to everyone except my wife. For the first time in months he sounded honest. Not defensive. Not angry. Just broken. William turned toward me. Hannah, I'm sorry. I nodded quietly. I know. And strangely I did. He had made mistakes. But unlike everyone else, he had chosen the truth when it mattered most. 3 weeks later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The moment I held her, everything changed. The anger. The fear. The heartbreak. None of it mattered as much as the tiny life sleeping in my arms. The future suddenly felt bigger than the pain. The divorce process continued much more carefully after that. Some relationships healed. Others didn't. But I stopped chasing explanations. Stopped carrying burdens that belonged to other people. One afternoon, William visited to meet his granddaughter. As he held her, he smiled through tears. She deserves a family built on honesty. I looked down at my daughter. She will have one. And in that moment I realized something important. Sometimes losing the version of life you planned isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of a better one. And as my daughter wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it with truth instead of fear.